All right, thanks everybody. I really appreciate your patience as we do those sound checks and get set up, making sure everyone can hear what we're doing in this webinar today. At this point, you should be able to see a big blue slide on your screen that says Bluebeam Webinar, Getting Started with Studio, and you should be hearing me speak. And I am Joe Sullivan in Pasadena, California, the headquarters for Bluebeam Software. The goal today is to give everyone a basic introduction into how the Studio tool in Revu works, so you get a sense of where it is. And I don't want to waste too much time, so I'm going to jump right into it. Before I can get in to what Studio is and how you can use it, I want to give a little bit of context so you have a sense of where we're coming from with this tool. Since for some of our customers, Studio is a part of Bluebeam Revu that they've never seen or used before, and to other customers, Studio is literally all they might know about Bluebeam, and they've never even heard of Revu as its own standalone tool. So a little context to make sure we're all on the same page. Our initial tool, Bluebeam Revu, is a PDF markup editing software that has been around for just about 15 years. And we created Bluebeam Revu originally to be able to allow people to take paper-based workflows, just making comments, red lines on drawings, and to be able to do that paperless with PDF files. And so that's kind of where we began, fairly basic, and we had a fair amount of success. So as of this point, we've got 94% of top U.S. contractors using Bluebeam, 86% of top U.S. design firms, 78% of specialty contractors, and 74% of top international design firms. So as a baseline, being able to allow folks to be able to mark up PDF files in Revu, we found some degree of success, and a good chunk of that success has to do with our approach. We have never ever been about telling people the way they should be working. Instead, we really like to partner with our customers as much as possible so that we can hear what their pain points are. And that could be as specific as sitting with them, observing how they are actually making markups on paper and trying to find a way to translate that digitally. So we very much prefer to be able to work directly with customers to help figure out what is causing them trouble and to be able to create a tool or a product that's going to help serve those needs. And where we sort of planted our flag is on the PDF as a file format. So as a baseline, the PDF as a file format is fairly simple, and some people can treat it as such, as though it's just electronic paper, right? Digital paper. But that isn't necessarily the case. PDF is more like a digital container of information. It's not just a digital paper. It can hold a vast amount of information, metadata, hyperlinks, bookmarks, file attachments, images, all of this sort of information. It can be included as part of a PDF. So as a case in point, if you were, for instance, to go try and work through a punch process, you might be marking up a drawing. You might also be tracking a list of data points. You might also be taking photographs. Prior to digital workflow, all of those bits of data or information would need to exist in totally separate programs. Using the PDF file format, all of that data can then exist in one document, a PDF. And so when we created Bluebeam Revu, when we started working with PDF markup, we wanted to expand the way people viewed and worked with PDFs, not just treating them as digital paper, but instead treating it as a common data environment, right? A single document that can contain multiple bits of data, all pertaining to that particular document. Now, this is when Studio comes in. As we partnered with our customers, one of the things we heard was, we like working with PDFs, and we like knowing that there's a common data environment for all data pertaining to that particular document. Well, if I take that document with all that data and I need to send that to somebody else, all of a sudden I've got 2 data environments, or 3 or 4 or 5, depending on all of the different individuals that might need to be looking at that data. And that doesn't necessarily suit the same purpose, right? If I take a common data environment and create 5 of them, there's not really a common data environment anymore. So Studio became as a sort of this necessary evolution. It wasn't enough to create a common data environment for the data pertaining to the file itself. Folks wanted to see a common data environment for all of the data pertaining to the project, every single sheet and all the data therein, and to be able to give people shared access to that information so everybody is working from the same live, up-to-date data. And that's more or less what Studio helps us to do. It allows us to utilize cloud space on Amazon Web Servers to either store documents or markup in real time. So you can see within Studio, you've got the ability to collaborate both online and offline. You've got secure file storage, the ability to access permissions and determine who has permission to access which documents in which folders. The ability to notify others and alert them to the presence of new markups or data. And then finally, activity tracking. So hopefully that's a little bit of context. The main idea here is that once we decided that a PDF was an easily digestible way to get data pertaining to that drawing to multiple individuals, it sort of makes sense that all of a sudden they wanted to be able to find a common area to access all of those documents instead of just collecting data one at a time. So that's a little bit of background, and hopefully Studio makes a little bit of sense. So it grew out of Bluebeam Review. It grew out of this desire to be able to put all necessary project data in one place so everyone can easily access it and know what is up to date. The agenda for today, for our Getting Started with Studio webinar, is to go over what is Bluebeam Studio. And hopefully we're about half of the way there, at least in terms of why it was created. I'll go into a little bit more specific detail in a second. I will walk you through how to create a Studio account, how to start and add content to what we call a Studio project, how to start and add content to what we call a Studio session, and then finally we'll walk through how to create a report of all session activities. So that's the plan for today. And let's jump into it. Again, final reminder, if you have questions about anything I've said, something is unclear, feel free to type something in the Q&A window. And we've got folks there that are going to be answering those questions as we go through. We are also making a recording of this presentation that will be accessible on the website a little bit later. So if I say something that goes over your head or something you just miss because you're trying to do too many things at once, know that you should have access to this. Not immediately, take some time to put together, but certainly on the website in the near future. So, first things first, Bluebeam Studio. I've already explained how Studio grew out of Bluebeam Review. So we had Bluebeam Review, a PDF desktop editor, and then we created a tool called Bluebeam Studio to allow folks to be able to access documents in a shared environment. And again, what we've done here at Bluebeam is essentially just purchase space on Amazon Web Servers, and then we give that space to customers to use in two ways. They can create either a Studio project, which at a broad level is just a lightweight document management system for storing files. And then we allow you to create Studio sessions, which are a very specific PDF markup collaborative environment where multiple people can mark up the same documents at the same time. So those are the two big portions of Studio, projects and sessions. And again, we're going to walk you through both of them today. Let's get out of here and open up Review. All right, given that this is a Studio-specific demonstration, I'm not going to be talking much about Review aside from the context I just provided, so keep that in mind. The first thing you're going to want to do, if you are looking in Bluebeam and you want to make use of Studio, you have to create a Studio account. Now, the good news is it is totally free to create a Studio account. You don't have to pay separately for Studio. If you already have a license of Review, simply click on the Studio button here in the top left-hand corner, and it will pop that Studio panel out from the right-hand side. As a fun side note, you don't even have to have a license of Bluebeam Review to create a Studio account. You could download our free viewer called View, spelled V-U, and you can create a Studio account through View as well. However, it should be worth noting that if you are creating a Studio account through View, you will have no ability to create projects or sessions. You would only be able to join projects or sessions that someone with a license of View has created. So if you're curious about what Studio is, feel free to stick around, but if you know that you're going to be utilizing the free viewer View, know that you won't be able to do any of the creating. You'd just be able to sort of join, should you have been invited. From this Studio panel, you can see this studio.bluebeam.com. That is the server space that I mentioned previously. If you're utilizing Studio, everyone's going to be utilizing studio.bluebeam.com to access the documents in that cloud space. First thing you'll do over here is come to this plug button. You'll notice a little red light let you know that cleverly we are not connected to the internet. So the first thing you're going to do, click on that button and you're going to get this little login window. Now for those of you that are again brand new to Studio, you will likely need to come down here to create account. And for those of you that are new to Bluebeam in general, there's a really good chance you downloaded Bluebeam, maybe even a free trial of Bluebeam Revu, and you were prompted with a login window and frankly you had no idea what it did. This is what it does. This login, there is no login necessary to utilize Bluebeam Revu. There is only a login necessary to be able to access this free cloud space in Studio. If this is your first time, click on Create Account in the bottom left-hand corner. To create a Studio account, it's fairly basic. All you'll really need to do is type in your email address. So for me, I'm going to type in joe@bluebeamsoftware.com. Come up with a password. Your password needs to have fairly typical password requirements. So it needs to be a minimum of 8 characters. It's got to have some mix of uppercase and lowercase letters. It's got to have a symbol and a number. That is fairly standard at this point. I'm not going to type in my password, if only because I only have like 3 of them that I mostly just rotate. It's probably not the best way to do things, but I'm positive I'm not alone. The idea is, though, come up with a password, something secure. Again, minimum 8 characters, a mix of uppercase and lowercase letters, at least 1 symbol and 1 number. You type in your password, and you can confirm. Now, down here at the bottom, you can see where it lists name. This is the way your name will appear when you make markups while you are in Studio. You can change this to anything you want. If I don't want Jay Sullivan, I can just go straight up with Joe Sullivan or Joe. This is something you can choose right now as you create your account. It is also something that you can certainly adjust later, so don't stress too much about this. I would, however, make certain your name is something that is unique to you. If you type in something a little bit broad or vague, it might get confusing when you start collaborating with others, trying to figure out who is who. All right, so once you've created your account, I'm actually going to log in because, again, I already have one. You'll see Access to Studio appear over here on the right-hand side. And you can see that the 2 parts of Studio I mentioned previously, Studio Projects and Studio Sessions. Now, you can see I've already got at least 1 session, 1 project open already there for me to access, and I'm going to hold off on jumping into those just yet. For now, I'm going to walk you through how you would create a Studio project from nothing. So again, the workflow scenario in this case is I want to be able to collaborate. I've got documents living locally, right? But I want people to be able to view those documents. I want to be able to get access to those documents when I'm not local to my local business server. So what am I going to do? I'm going to put them into a Studio project so I can have access to them anywhere I have a Revu and an internet connection, and more than that, I can share access to those files with others. So I'll come up to the top here and click on Start. And notice I can start a new session or a new project. We're going to do a project first. The first thing it's going to prompt me to do is a name, and because I am super clever, I'm going to type in the Studio Webinar. So, I've created a Studio project called Studio Webinar. Now the first thing you'll notice is the project has actually already been created. It's got a 9-digit ID over here, 556009356. And now it's prompting me to fill this Studio project with documents. I can either create a brand new folder, upload individual files, or upload a whole folder of files. It's worth pointing out here that a Studio project, as I mentioned before, is just a lightweight document management system. It's just storage. So if you're already using, and there's a ton of programs that do similar things in terms of storage, some that you might be familiar with are Box or Dropbox or SharePoint. Studio Projects does something very similar. It just simply enables you to upload documents into a shared environment and kind of set a little bit of control and permissions over that environment. So for some customers that are already using another document management system, they might not ever use projects. For other customers that don't necessarily have access to those systems but already have a license of Revu, then Studio Projects is a great way to utilize similar sort of technology from a program you already have access to. At this point, I'm going to choose to upload a particular folder of documents into this project, I'm going to click on Upload Folder. And here I've got a folder called Studio Webinar. Super creative. Lucky for you, this folder only has about 5 or 6 documents in it. If you are uploading a folder structure for a project, you will likely have hundreds, maybe even thousands of files that you're trying to upload into CloudSpace. I would not suggest you do that if you have somewhere to go in the next 5 minutes, right? If you are uploading a significant number of documents into CloudSpace, please make sure you're setting aside the time to do so. Maybe at the end of the day and then let it run overnight. Or do it at the beginning of the day and then go off to get a cup of coffee or something. If you have a lot of files you're uploading into CloudSpace, pardon me, please make sure you're allotting a reasonable amount of time for that to happen. This happened fairly quickly. 4 documents, all living in this one folder, and including a standalone PowerPoint for this particular presentation. So we're in a studio project. I've got my documents uploaded. Who do I want to join me in this space? Right now it's just me. I, as the individual studio account, have created this project, and right now I am the person in charge of this project. I'm the only one with access to these files. If I want to be able to invite others to join me, I can come up top here to Settings. Once I click on Settings, you'll see a tab called General. You'll also see a tab over here called User Access. Now at this point I have the ability to invite a couple different users to join me here. So I'm going to invite my colleagues here. And I'll do one more. And you'll notice this checkbox, Restrict Users. Restrict Users means the only people that will ever be able to join me in this studio project are folks that I've actually invited to join me. In this case, my colleagues Ben and Donovan. If I was to uncheck this box and then click Apply, what I am telling the project is to not restrict any users. That means that literally anyone that happens to get their hands on this 9-digit ID is going to be able to get into my studio project. I literally cannot think of any reason why anyone would do that ever, under most scenarios. For me, in a demo scenario, if I just wanted to have somebody come in, like Ben and Donovan, without having to worry about waiting for an invitation, I might uncheck it. Again, it's up to you, but 99% of the time in my experience, folks are going to leave that Restrict Users box checked. All right, now, once I've invited them, well, your next question might be, well, what can they do now that you can get into that space? What are they going to be allowed to do once they get into this space? Here, I can click on the Permissions tab, and you'll notice there's 2 Permissions tabs. There's regular permissions here and folder permissions. I'm going to start with folder permissions because I think it's the most immediately vital. If I'm inviting folks to join me in this shared project space, they're going to have access to my files, right? First and foremost. So what kind of access do I want them to have for my files? Well, here, notice the project root. The default is to give folks read-only access. So this means I've invited 2 folks to join me, and they have the ability to read the documents that I've uploaded into this space, all of them. You'll notice there is also a secondary folder, Studio Webinar, that I can set differing types of permissions. You'll notice the types of permissions we have here for folders are read, read-write, read-write, delete, and then finally hidden. If you decide to hide folders, then obviously they will not be visible to specific individuals if that's what you choose. Read, I would suggest, is a really reasonable default for everybody. Read-write would obviously be for folks that you want to be able to mark those documents up. And then read-write, delete, I would reserve only for a handful of admins, because once you delete a document from a project, there is no obviously simple way to get it back without having to contact tech support and spending a fair amount of time chasing that down. So again, my tip for you would be to not give read-write, delete privilege to almost anybody unless you're totally prepared for them to take that sort of responsibility on. Note that you can set different permissions for different folders. So here I can say I want Studio Webinar folder to have read-write permission, even though for the project at large, I want read permission to be the default. Or, to go one step further, I can say I want read-write, just read permission as the default for everybody, But maybe I want to set aside a couple of different individuals to have separate permissions from the default. Attendees here, we are setting the permissions for everyone we've invited into this project, all attendees. Notice I've invited both Ben and Donovan, 2 individuals. If I decided I wanted to add one of these individuals, let's say Ben is helping me on this project. Maybe I want Ben to have a read-write permission. I can set a separate permission for Ben, whereas the rest of the attendees, in this case Donovan, is only going to have read permission. So Donovan essentially is going to be in this project with read-only permission, where my colleague Ben will be able to both read and mark up. So from this folder permissions tab, this is fairly key. If you're going to utilize Studio projects, not only are you able to upload documents, they can be multiple file types, not just PDF, but also PowerPoints, images, Word documents, CAD drawings, what have you. You're just utilizing this storage space to upload a folder structure and then set permissions on who can do what within those folders. Now, this first permissions tab is really tied specifically to Studio projects types permissions, meaning not what access do they have to the files, but what access do they have to the tools that are specific to projects? Like, do I allow them to invite others to join me in this project space? Am I going to allow them to have access to this user access tab over here? Am I going to allow them to manage the permissions that we've just set? Am I going to allow them to send a PDF to a session, which will make more sense momentarily? Will I allow them to revoke checkout, share file links, or give them just flat out full control? So these are, again, also permissions that you can apply to all attendees or to individual names within this specific project. All right, now that we're through with permissions, at least for the time being, let's work through some of how the interface looks as you want to access these documents. Now, one thing to keep in mind, once you are in a Studio project, if I double-click on this first document, you'll notice it will open up over here on the left-hand side. I've also opened up the second document. You can see the tab-based functionality that exists within Revu. One of the things to note, even though I have both of these documents open, if I come up top here to markup, all my tools are grayed out. I can't do much of anything here. And that is because Studio Projects works on a check-in, check-out basis. When you set read-write permission, you're not just giving them the opportunity to mark up. They have to be able to check the file out. So this is essentially permission-based. This is not live collaboration. Studio Projects is not built to have multiple people marking up the same document at the same time together. Studio Projects is just again, a lightweight document management system for storage, where you can set permissions and give people access to documents, again, on a check-in, check-out basis. If I want to be able to check a document out, if it's already open, I can simply click on the little golden lock in the top left-hand corner and check it out. I can make my markups at that point, and every other part about Revu is going to work fundamentally exactly the same as you are used to with local files. The markups list is still here, tracking markups that I make upon a drawing. Tool sets you still have access to over here on the left-hand side. All of this information is still easily accessible. Again, the only difference is you're pulling documents from this cloud server in a Studio project rather than pulling them locally. Once you are done marking up your drawing, I can click back on this little red check and check this document back in. So that's real basic functionality. Now, a couple other tips for you to be aware of. One, you absolutely do not have to open up the document and then check it out. If I know what I'm working on ahead of time, I can simply right-click and check a document out. Frankly, if I'm working with all 4 of these, I can right-click and check them all out. Once they're all checked out, again, my local machine is reaching up to the cloud server and saying, hey, I want to claim permission of that document, so I am the one who's going to be working with it. All 4 are checked out. One thing to note, checking out is not the same as opening, right? They're different functions. So I've checked all of them out, meaning no one else can access them, but I still have to click on them to open them up. So even though they're checked out, checking out in documents and opening them are not the same thing by default. If you've got questions in Q&A or maybe you want to contact me later, perhaps it will come up in a slightly more advanced webinar. You can go into the settings and that's an option you can change. If that is an annoying feature to you, you can have a checkout on open option available, but that is not the default. So for basic users, people approaching this for the first time, know those are two different steps. And again, once you have it open, you have free reign to mark it up. Once you click on this little red check, notice I can check it back in. I can also update server copy. And what update server copy will do is push my markups up to the cloud without checking the file back in. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and check this document back in as well. I'm going to close this down. And again, an important key to know here, if you're dealing with permissions, particularly checkout, you want to make sure you're checking these documents back in. If I leave this project and I still have all 3 of these documents checked out, nobody else in this project is going to be able to get to those documents and check them out. Not unless, if I go to settings here, not unless I've granted them revoke checkout privileges. So it is important if you're going to utilize Studio projects, you want to spend some time building a process that makes sense so people understand why it is important to check out, check back in, and who should have permission to revoke those things should they need to do so. I'm going to go ahead and check all of those documents back in. And voila, that is Studio projects in a nutshell. Now, one thing worth pointing out before we jump into Studio sessions, this sync button. Now, this is probably, for some customers, one of the more complicated parts of utilizing Studio projects. If you have an internet connection, if you always have access to the internet, you honestly never need to worry about this sync button, and isn't that great news? If you have forever access to internet connectivity, don't even worry about this button. You might as well get rid of it. However, in the real world, I don't know anyone that always has access to solid internet connectivity. Sometimes people are going to have to go without. So the sync button then can come in real handy. When I have an internet connection, as you can tell here from my little plugged in icon and my green circle there, I don't have to worry about syncing. I can simply just check it out immediately. And the moment I hit checkout, I get a little window because my computer is reaching out to that Amazon web server and bringing down a local copy of that document for me to be able to work with. And then when I'm checking it back in, it's sending all of my changes right back up to the cloud. See, it's uploading that stuff to an Amazon web cloud right there in that moment. If I don't have access to an internet connection, this becomes more of a problem. So, for instance, let's say I go offline. One of the things you'll notice about working offline is that if I try to open up a document, what I am getting when I open it up is the last version that I pulled from the server. This is not up to date. This is not live. If I am checking this out, notice I can't even check it out. Instead, I'm getting an edit offline mode, which will start to essentially allow me to mark up a version of the document that is my own. So if you are working offline, you start falling into more of these traps where you are not working with a single source of truth. And although there are definitely workflows that we can talk about, those workflows are probably better reserved for another webinar and another day, not an introduction. So for your purposes, what I would suggest, if internet connectivity is an issue, as it sometimes is, get in the habit of selecting these documents, which you can do by hovering over and clicking this little green arrow here, selecting specific documents to sync. And then when you do have an internet connection, sync down. And what that will do is reach up to that server at that immediate point in time, pull down the most up-to-date version of that document immediately. So if you do need to go somewhere without internet connectivity, you've at least got something most recently correct to work with. Again, if you've got questions about that, it's probably best that you contact us directly and we can talk you through that. But no, for at least a basic introduction, this sync button is totally unnecessary if you're constantly working with an internet connection. If you have connectivity issues, then reach out and we can go into more detail about that workflow. All right, let's leave. going to leave that Studio project. I'm going to jump into this other one I've created for two reasons. One, because I want to show you what a real project would actually look like. It wouldn't necessarily be a folder with 4 documents. Instead, it would be multiple folders, a huge folder structure with multiple file types. And two, I also want to point out that one of the useful features about Studio projects is, if I right-click here, revision history. Revision history is something that allows you to see every single revision of the document over time. So every time a document's been checked back in, I can see that. You can see I created this project back in May. I checked it out and then in yesterday, as did my colleague Ben, who checked this out and back in. So if I wanted to see the good work that Ben has done in the meantime, again, I can open up that document. I can view those markups, and again, the markups list will work as expected, and I can see his markups there upon the document. So in a real-life example, you tend to see a lot more with a Studio project, but again, you tend to get a lot more access to those documents in that space. All right, let's jump out of Studio projects. If you have any questions about Studio projects, please feel free to type them in the Q&A window. We are going to jump now into Studio sessions, which I think are awesome and ultimately much more fun. So, as we spent a fair amount of time, Studio projects, document management, not live collaboration, just a place to store files. Studio sessions are very unique. A Studio session is PDF specific, so you're not going to be able to upload multiple file types, just PDFs. But what a Studio session essentially creates is a very unique PDF markup environment built to be collaborative. So let's talk about what that looks like. To build a Studio session, I'm going to click on Start, and this time I'm going to go with New Session. And again, I'm going to say Studio Webinar. After I've given it the name, it's going to ask me for the documents I wish to upload into this session. And again, I need PDF files, so I'm going to grab a few. And again, when you are creating a session, essentially what you are doing is taking local PDF files and putting them in a new location. So I want to make it clear that once you are uploading these documents off of your desktop, off of your local server and into Studio, you've essentially created 2 copies. So a solid workflow would be to no longer work on the ones that are local, maybe save those so you have them. But the actual work, the marking up, the back and forth, once you've uploaded this stuff into Studio, ideally is taking place within the world of Studio. So I've got these 4 documents uploaded into a Studio session. I can choose to set the baseline permissions right now, whether or not I want folks to be able to save as, to be able to print, to markup alert, or to add documents. I have the ability to restrict attendees by email address, and I also have the ability to set an expiration for this session. In this case, I'll have this one expire today at 5 p.m. I'm going to click on OK, and it's going to go ahead and create that session for me and upload those documents in that space. Now, the nice thing about a Studio session is that it's going to actually prompt me to invite others to join. So in this case, I can click on my little green plus and do so individually, or I can actually come down here and attempt to access a group. Now, a group is simply a name that you apply to a collection of email addresses. And in this specific instance, I've already created an admin group and I filled it with 2 email addresses, my colleague Ben and my colleague Lillian. So if those are 2 email addresses I'm working with frequently, I can actually create a group of those emails, give them a name, and simply add that group quickly and easily when I need to invite them. I can also go ahead here and manually add my colleague Donovan so he can join us in this space as well. So once I click on OK, I have an option here to type in a message that just says, join me if I want, or maybe markups due by Friday. This is totally optional. Once I put these email addresses here in this space, I click on OK, and an emailed invitation gets sent to Ben, to Donovan, and to Lily, letting them know, hey, you've been invited into this session, and that email actually provides a link. And clicking on that link will essentially immediately open up Revu and allow you to access that session. This might be how some of you became familiar with Bluebeam. It's becoming more and more common that the first time you've ever heard about Studio is because someone sends you an invitation one day and you're trying to figure out exactly what it is and where you're going. All right, so at this point in time, I've created this studio session. As of this moment in time, I am the only attendee. Let's go back and view our settings, just to make sure this all checks out. So you'll recall I set this specific permission. I did email invites. For the purposes of making this demonstration a little simpler, I'm actually not going to restrict attendees. I'm going to open this up. So if Ben and Donovan theoretically had this 9-digit ID, all they would have to do is click on join and type it in. And you can see that Ben has already been able to join me within the studio session. You can also see those permissions I set, allowing everything except the ability to add documents to literally everybody. Now again, this is also something that these permissions are things that you can set on a specific studio account basis. So in this scenario, I can come into my group and I can say, you know what, I want Ben and Lily here to be able to have full control. And now I've granted those 2 email addresses in my group full control, while the default for most other attendees is to deny this add documents privilege. So you have a lot of control there. Again, to create groups or to edit those groups, you simply click on that group button right there. Once we're here in the session, you'll notice 3 attendees, myself, Ben, and Donovan. We've got 4 documents here. Again, each of these documents I can open up simply by clicking on them. And I can take a look at the markups that might be therein. Now, if I want to see exactly what Ben and or Donovan might be doing, I can hover over a name and you can see these little footprints. These little footprints will allow me to follow individuals and view their cursor, so I can take a look at exactly what they're doing as they're doing it. So in this case, I'm following around Ben. You can see I'm following Ben because now there's a really terrifyingly creepy blue shadow man standing next to him, right next to his name. In that instance, I can see he's dropping a markup, and he is doing this live. Ben, I should point out, is my colleague, but he's out of our Chicago office while I'm sitting here in Pasadena. As long as we both have internet connectivity, that is not preventing either one of us from being able to view the markups that we're making. So I can see that Ben has made this markup, and frankly, if I wanted to, I can go ahead and make markups of my own. Now, one of the things to point out about a studio session is one of the concerns that sometimes comes up is, oh, that's amazing. That also seems like it could be a problem. Like, how do you make sure that all of the information is correct? How do you prevent people from adding, deleting, or changing markups that they shouldn't be, frankly, adding, deleting, or changing? And we built studio sessions around essentially around the idea that we want everything in a session to be trackable. So I have made this markup here. I can move it. I can delete it. And frankly, all of those movements are tracked down here in this record. I can see that I made a cloud, I moved that cloud, and then I deleted that cloud. However, if I were to select Ben's markup here and right-click on it, you'll notice everything is grayed out. And that is because while you are in a studio session, to protect a certain amount of accountability, you are unable to edit or change the markups made by anybody else within that session. You are only able to edit or change markups that you yourself have made. So in this specific instance, if I have a message here called confirm rail height, this was made by Ben, I wouldn't be able to do anything to change this markup. However, I can reply. So in this specific instance, I can type a reply down here below. I can say rail height, let's see, 36 inches. And what that reply will do is in the markups list, I can view this specific markup, and then you can see I've got my reply tied to that specific markup. So you can still communicate within a studio session, even though you don't have control over the markups of others. Another way you can communicate is obviously if you're both in here live, there's a chat window. You can see Ben chatted a hi Joe to me, and I can say hi Donovan if I want to be able to communicate. So you can definitely chat within this window in addition to being able to do that reply. So you can still communicate back and forth. Frankly, we've got a fair number of folks that will tie session usage into a conference call, and you can have everybody on the phone as you're running through this. How you choose to utilize some of the benefits of this are entirely up to you. In this session record down here below, again, it is a little unique from this markups list. This markups list, which you are hopefully familiar with, is tracking the presence of markups on the sheet. What this record is tracking is literally everything that's occurred within the session itself. And that takes 5 kind of broad categories here. It's going to track all of the instances of chat. It's going to track every markup, not just the addition of the markup, but as I pointed out earlier, the movement of markups and the deletion of markups. It will track documents that have been added. It will track attendees joining and leaving, and it will track alerts. Now, an alert is another way for you to communicate over a specific markup. If I wanted to, for instance, place a markup quickly on this PDF, I can right-click on that markup, alert attendee, and choose to alert everybody within this particular group. And what happens when I send an alert? Frankly, 3 things. One, this notifications panel here will start to flash orange, and then you will see a notification populate here. 2, you will get a notification if you are outside of the session itself. You'll see a little red button, sort of like you've got an app on your phone that needs to be updated. And then 3, you'll also get an email. An email will be sent to you saying, hey, you've been alerted to the presence of markup in session 521485776. Go check it out. So you can see those alerts appear down here below. And again, if you are in the session live, they will populate here within that tab. Now, Sessions was built, frankly, around live communication, and that's how it is most powerful. However, as I mentioned with projects, connectivity is sometimes an issue, right? So know that even if you work offline, you still have the ability to utilize Sessions. The trade-off in this instance is that the markups I am making will not be visible to other folks within the session because, again, they are online and I am not. So when I am making markups while in offline mode, you'll see them listed here under pending. So every markup I make in this instance will be listed under pending. The moment I go back online and I get connected, that pending list, all those markups will get worked back up to the document living in cloud space, and my colleagues Ben and Donovan will be able to view those markups once again. All right, now in terms of reporting, just to wrap this up because we're almost done here, you have the ability to create a report twice, either at any point within the session. You can come over here, and if you are the administrator, I will have the ability to create this report. Now, the report is of the record. That is to say, the report is of the information in this box down here in the bottom right-hand corner, everything that's taken place within the session. For our purposes here, I can choose to create a basic record summary on PDF. I can click on OK, and I'll save this just on my desktop here. And now I've got a session report, a report of all the work that's been done on the session as of this moment in time. So I can choose to include all of the attendees, all of the documents, and again, literally everything that's taken place within this record. So I can see markups being added, moved, deleted, edited. I can see chat. I can see all of that information within this record. So if I decide to keep a session open for a period of a week or 2, I can maybe get status updates using this record every few days. Note that when I created that report, I had the option to include or not include a lot of that information. So you can specify that if you wish. The other time that you can pull that report is when you close a session. And it's worth noting at the top here, I have the ability to leave a session while still leaving the session open. So I can jump back into it at any time. Sessions are great, but they don't mean that you have to do live collaboration at any point. You can leave a session open and jump back into it should you need to do that. You also have the ability to finish a session. Now, the only person who should be able to finish a session is the admin or someone that may have full control. If I have this finish button, I'm formally able to finish this session, meaning I'm closing it down for everybody. If I click on finish, I have, again, the option to generate a report, the exact same summary report I just showed you. You also have the ability to save the marked up PDF in some location. So in this specific instance, I can either choose to save to overwrite the document wherever I originally pulled it from, or I can choose to save it in a new location, or choose not to save anything at all. Once I go ahead and pull this report, and again, if I come over here to settings, You'll see the exact same options I showed you previously. Let's make this one a PDF package with the document and the report, and I'm going to save this just on the desktop. Click on OK. I'm closing the session down, saving all the markups that may have been made on those documents within the session. At this point, Ben and Donovan have likely been booted out of it because I've closed it down here while they were inside. And once I click on OK, I can actually go to Open, Desktop, track down the Studio report that I had just created here on this particular list. Whoop. And then go to work. So that is the reporting within the Studio sessions. And that's Studio in a nutshell. Now, a couple things to be aware of as you go forward. If you've got more questions about Studio, and it's important to realize that Studio is more than just a tool. The way we've talked about Studio today, literally any individual that happens to have a license can use it to build sessions, to build projects. But for it to really have full value, having 50 individuals all with their own sessions and projects is probably not the most efficient. It's wise to spend some time thinking through your workflow. If you need help with that or need help getting more people up to speed on Studio and how you might want to do a deeper dive into some of the things you can do there, feel free to look into our training options and go to bluebeam.com/training for more information. You can also go to our community development page. We have Bluebeam user groups who have developed quite advanced Studio-based workflows, some utilizing dashboards, some utilizing our centralized Studio administration portal called Studio Prime. There's a lot of high-level conversations to be had about Studio when you get to that point, should you want to start utilizing Studio a little bit more heavily. And in terms of upcoming webinars, there are a ton. Tomorrow, there's a Getting Started with Revu webinar. Again, today was focused just on our Studio feature, not on any of the Revu features. So if you're curious about Bluebeam Revu for PDF, desktop markup, and editing, check that out tomorrow. On August 8th, we've got an Advanced Takeoffs and Estimates webinar. On the 22nd, Advanced Document Control. On the 23rd, Collaboration in Bluebeam Studio. And then on the 29th, Review for Collaborative Review, which is a mouthful. All right, this has been the Getting Started with Studio webinar. I hope it was helpful, at least as a basic introduction. If you have any questions, again, feel free to type them in the Q&A window. We'll be here for a few more minutes answering those questions. But if there's anything else you need, feel free to reach out to us at Bluebeam. Go to the website, check out some of the training videos. Guys, I again hope it has been helpful. I've enjoyed the time. Have a fantastic rest of your day.